Sort of below the Rio Grande, it's this sort of netherworld. It's this sort of little brother to the United States, and then we sort of help them when they have their problems. But I really feel like it's all America, and I wanted to get to know America.
Yeah.
I'm an American. I feel like if I can get to know America first, maybe I'll do a trip one day in India or Asia, or you know what I mean. But I really wanted to understand what America means, because it's the entire continent, supercontinent. I mean, from the farthest north to the farthest south, we're all these mixtures of immigrants and natives and conquistadors and victims, and you know, and we're creating something new, and it's still a very young culture. I mean, we're as in terms of the actual mix, it's only 500 years old. You know, obviously indigenous cultures were very old, and they had come, according to the dominant theories, from Asian cultures and whatnot. But we're a young culture, and we're learning, and unfortunately, the Industrial Revolution has given us the opportunity to exploit resources in such an efficient and fast manner that we may not have time to observe and make mistakes and fix them, and observe and make mistakes and fix them. Like the indigenous people, you know, they had thousands of years.
Even some of them didn't. It didn't work.
Even some of them, it didn't work.
I mean,
but they did a lot better.
Several civilizations that disappeared because.
That's right. You have the Mayans.
Because they continue to.
That's right. Well, I mean, you have a perfect example of a lot of the indigenous civilizations that we revere, that were American, let's say. The Mayans, the Aztecs, the Incans. Those are the three dominant. You know, they're very similar structurally to how we live. You know, they had very complex and oppressive hierarchies. They used slave labor. They built these incredible monuments to the gods. They destroyed their natural resource bases. They were more consumptive than other indigenous cultures who didn't leave such a big, deep, sloppy ecological footprint. And I find that, you know, it's pretty typical that we would revere something closer to what our civilization is doing, because we like people and things that are mirrors of us. And I think it's interesting, their culture too. I mean, but I think we need to keep that in mind, that yeah, a lot of those, especially the Mayans, one theory is, you know, to build their pyramids, they actually had to make a mortar out of cal, they call it, and it's like limestone mortar basically. And to do that, they had to cut down wood and have fire to chemically process this. And basically, one theory is that they actually cut down all of the jungle in that southern Mexico and northern Guatemala region in the jungle, and that basically once they cut down the forests, they couldn't grow the corn anymore after a while. The soil wasn't holding its fertility, and they started sacrificing more and more people, trying to appease the gods. Didn't understand exactly what was happening. We know better nowadays, but we're still not changing. Our agricultural systems aren't based on sound science. They're very simplified systems of succession in nature, and monocultures, which nature destroys because they're weak. And you can look at that on all levels. You can look at monoculture in terms of agriculture. You can look at monoculture in terms of human culture. When you have a homogeneous culture, whatever it is, it's weak, and something will come along and destroy it. And I think, unfortunately, one of the negative aspects of globalization is it tends to homogenize culture, because the dominant cultures that have much more media power, that have much more appeal and just reach, they tend to influence and kill off other cultures that just can't survive. You know, and I don't know. We'll see. Well, it'll be interesting to see what, you know, we're losing languages and cultures every day, you know, every week, and it'll be interesting to see what new diversity comes from these mixtures. because of course that also has to create a new diversity, the global world. But yeah, I mean, we'll have to figure that out, figure out how to use that, because we can't go back. We're in a global world now. We've got to figure out how to go forward and to just, learn how to live within our means. I don't think it's that complicated. It's just gotten so big, and corporate power, of course, corporate influence on public policy, a perspective that of top-down change as the only possible change, I think is inhibiting, and we're sort of disabling our ability to make change, because we just have a lot of people that only look at democracy as top-down change, and I think it's got to come from the grassroots and the community if it's going to be a true democracy, if it's going to work. And local, and it's got to be a small scale. I don't think that these large centralized cities are an ecologically feasible model. And obviously I don't have the expertise to really go into that, but from the literature that I've read, they're all talking the same thing. Small scale, integrated, non-centralized structures, I think, are the way to go, and I think that you get that from nature. Nature shows us that that's how systems function efficiently.
Well, the media certainly isn't talking about that enough. They're trying to homogenize people, like you say, like monocultures, and they are certainly not a very good feedback loop, acknowledging people for doing the right thing. I mean, the way I see it, you see a piece of news that talks about an environmental catastrophe, but before cutting to what you can do in your own life at home, they cut right to the advertisement of a particular type of furniture polish or something like that.
That may be responsible for,
yeah,
in some indirect way or direct way, for some of these environmental problems that we're suffering from.
Yeah, the feedback loop is so poor.
Yeah.
I mean, how...
And it's just, we live in such a chaotic world now. It's chaos. It's a culture of chaos. We don't know where we stand. We don't know what we believe. We're not sure of our rituals, our myths. I think that we're in a stage right now where people are really searching for some type of cultural identity and spirituality. I don't watch very much TV anymore. I definitely grew up watching a fair share of TV, although my parents disapproved, but I demanded to be allowed to watch television. I went to my friend's house. I found ways. And I think it's tough, raising kids. How are you going to keep them from watching their favorite TV shows? How are they going to be able to communicate with their peers when they can't talk about the latest computer game, when they can't talk about the latest TV or reality show? So it's complicated. I mean, you can make them live a Luddite type of life. But as a Belgian friend of mine told me, you're really cutting them off from their peer group and doing them maybe damage socially if you're going to control in that aspect. So I'm not sure what the solution is in terms of the media. We're all influenced permanently. And I think that the key is just to be aware of it and be critical of it. And to really think about it and break it down. What does it mean to be critical of it? Not to just be reactionary and just take it for what it is, but to be critical. And I think that's hard to do. We don't live in a very critical society. We don't have long-term memories of history or what happened a few years ago. And so, it doesn't take long for the media to give us sort of some propaganda, and all of a sudden we believe it. The Iraq War is a perfect example. Somehow they made a connection between September 11th and the Iraq War, and there wasn't any. And people still today, they see it as a connection. But there wasn't one, so, it's nothing new, it's just the most recent thing. It's a cycle and it's a pattern that repeats itself.
Well, everybody ride your bike, please.